Atop the bluffs at Peninsula State Park lies Eagle Bluff Lighthouse.
Don't miss the great views and local history.
In the northwest section of Peninsula State Park shines Eagle Bluff Lighthouse. Nicknamed the Guardian of the Strawberry Channel, this structure has witnessed over 150 years of maritime history.
The passage has proved both convenient and yet sometimes dangerous, but remains popular today. The Milwaukee Cream City Brick Building has a tower that ultimately reaches 76 feet above the water. The tower itself is 43 feet tall and has 13-inch thick walls.
As travel increased in this area, the federal government appropriated $12,000 and set aside 12 acres of public land for the project. Construction of the lighthouse was completed on the bluff in 1868.
Henry Stanley was the first keeper of Eagle Bluff Lighthouse. He served until 1883, when Civil War veteran Captain William Duclon took over. Captain Duclon and his wife Julia and their 7 sons lived in the lighthouse year-round for 35 years.
This is the Duan Family home, Eagle Bluff Lighthouse, and you're actually in what would have been their dining room or their main living space. You came into the winter kitchen, which right now is actually a gift shop. At one point, it really did have a huge, giant cast iron stove. But in the summertime, they would obviously take it apart, move it out into the other area, and then, and they would cool things off, and they would put that cast iron stove into the summer kitchen. So the family had 9 people. They lived here the longest of any lighthouse keepers. They were here for 35 years. And Julia and her husband, William, liked it so much that actually once they retired, they actually didn't even leave the area. They bought a house in Fish Creek, and that house is still standing today, which is kind of nice. And when they passed away, they're buried in the Blossomburg Cemetery. So they raised 7 kids here. And I like to tell a story about the yoke in the corner here. And when every boy had their 8th birthday, their father would gift them a yoke. And then they would have to go down this long set of stairs here with those yokes and go down and pick up water. And that was the only source of water that they had. They did have a cistern, but if it didn't rain much, the cistern dried out, then they didn't have any water. So it was years before they actually had a pair of horses come in and drill down. Now we're on the Niagara Escarpment, and so it's lots and lots of stone and broken bedrock, broken limestone. So it took, I think they said, 2 years for them to drill through to get down to the bottom to be able to have water. And in the meantime, they just kept bringing it up with a yoke there. I like to think that they would have had a yoke running party after they actually got done. But maybe that was the only one that survived. Parlor was off limits. Doors were probably closed to keep the boys out because it was only for the special visitors. Julia and William's, Captain Duclon's bedroom was over there, and it's one of those ones that has a rope tied to it, which, I like to tell the kids, that's where you get the sleep tight. Because enough sleeping on that bed and that rope, you'd eventually be on the floor, and that wouldn't be a very nice way to sleep. So I was like, okay, crank it up. And someone said, how do you know when to replace the rope? I said, well, I guess when you can't tighten it up anymore. Now, one of my favorite spaces is in here. This was actually Captain Duclon's office, which he shared with the piano. They turned it into their music room, his office and the music room. So his office is right here, his desk. And he kept notes. As a lighthouse keeper, he was required to keep notes about the weather and ships he saw and people that came by, and he was terrible at keeping notes. If you take a look at that, you'll see it's just about the same weather every single day that he recorded. Well, eventually, somebody caught on to him and he got in trouble. And they told him, you better start keeping better notes, otherwise, you're not doing your job. And above that, you can see a box of paint. And what happened was every year they were required to repaint the interior of the lighthouse here, every surface, the walls, the ceiling, everything. It came as a dry box. And when the boys were getting in trouble or they were misbehaving, one of the ways that their mother calmed them down was she put them to work. And one of the ways she put them to work was she'd give them a brush and say, go paint. And so she actually managed to keep a handle on them by making them go and paint things, which I found really interesting. Another interesting part of this room is the lighthouse library box. They had rotating boxes of books, and the lighthouse service would actually come by once a year, drop off supplies, and they only dropped off the supplies enough for the lighthouse keeper himself. because he was the employee and they were taking care of the employees. So the family, the 7 boys and the wife, they actually had to raise their own food. So they had a barn, they had a garden, they had cows and chickens and everything else, and they took care of themselves. And then they brought this, but the lighthouse service, when they dropped things off, the food off, they brought this library box, and it was loaded with books. And every once a year, they would basically come, close this one up, and give them a new one, and take this one and take it off to another lighthouse. So if you're ever up on Rock Island, the Potawatomi Lighthouse has a library box as well. So you can see that, they did actually make the rounds around. Music room, Julia, with 7 boys. She came from a lighthouse keeping family herself, but she was well trained, and she was trained in music. So she homeschooled her kids because there wasn't a school. Eventually, they did build a school in the Blossomburg settlement over there by Blossomburg Cemetery. So the boys eventually did go to school there, but until there was a school, she took care of them at home. And she also taught them music. So this was their piano. And Walter, the youngest boy who came and helped with some of the interpretation of the building here, that was his guitar. He actually brought some artifacts back and donated them back to the lighthouse, that people got a feel of what it was like when they were really here. Well, the boys, they all played something, and they liked to sing together. They would take this, they'd take the piano, take the legs off of it, wrap it up in quilts, turn it sideways, and go right out that window. And then there would be a wagon there, and they would load it into the wagon, then go into Fish Creek or out German Settlement, from wherever. But they would go and have dances and have music and provide music. Story goes, when they were out providing their music, the Cana Island Lighthouse boys would sometimes show up too, because they had a family with a lot of boys that lived there for a long time. And the boys didn't like each other. As the story goes, the Cana Island Lighthouse didn't like the fact that the Duclon family were better musically trained, and they had more girls following them. So they fought over the girls. And so that's how it goes. But whatever the case, it is well known between both lighthouses that the boys did fight on a regular basis. Please feel free to take a look around. There's interpretive things here. We've got the staircase that goes all the way up to the base of the lighthouse. You'll be able to look through and see our Fresnel lens. It still is a functioning light, not that light itself, but the Coast Guard has a solar panel and a battery and a light up there. It's 1 second on and 6 seconds off is our indicator. Our lighthouse tower is square shaped, turned on its side like a diamond, and it's exactly the same as the one on Chambers Island. The only difference is the shape of the tower. Their tower is an octagon, and they use those as day indicators, so that if they looked at the lighthouse, they would say, oh, that's a square tower, it must be over here, versus an octagon, it's over there. Now our tower, we started out here with the 3.5 order Fresnel lens, which is a pretty big, powerful lens. And what happened was that it was actually shining all the way to the other side of the bay over Michigan, and it was interfering with some of the trafficking, the ship traffic in the other channel. And so they said, well, that's not a good idea. So they switched out our 3.5 order for a 5th order. So it's a smaller one. You can see it on Chambers Island, and they could see it wherever they needed to, but they didn't actually have to worry about it conflicting with some of the traffic in the other channel. And this one is still used as a navigational light. It still functions. It's still on. It's owned by the Coast Guard up there, so that's why we don't go up there. And it's pretty small. But I have to say, we're really proud that we still have our own Fresnel lens at the original one, because a lot of times they get stolen or they just break or disappear. So we're glad to have that. Interesting fact about the staircase is at the bottom, it's got its own little separate cellar. It's walled off with extra thick walls, and that's where they used to keep some of the fuel before they built the oil house. So this does get hit by lightning, and had been getting hit by lightning, and at one point somebody decided that maybe it wasn't a good idea to be keeping flammable, combustible liquids down in the basement with lightning. So that's when they finally got around to actually building the oil house. But that's kind of it. But that's not accessible. There's not a whole lot down there. The last time I was down there was basically filled with bugs and spider webs, so not exciting. And upstairs we've got the boys' bedroom. 7 boys in 1 bedroom. They spend time there, they spend time here, they spend time up in their bedroom, and they spend time outdoors. Right above us is the guest bedroom, where some of the older boys, when they got married, they would bring their brides back, and their mother would help the new bride learn how to be a wife, teach her how to can and things like that. I honestly think it was because she liked the company, liked having another female here for a few months. But please feel free to look around. If you've got any questions, there's lots of interpretive signs that you can read, and I'm just be wandering around here, myself or Jacob, and we'll be glad to answer any questions.
Following Duclon's retirement in 1918, Peter Coughlin was appointed as the final keeper. When the lamp was automated with acetylene gas in 1926, the keeper's time living at Eagle Bluff ended.
In 1960, the Door County Historical Society received permission to restore the lighthouse and open it as a museum. The society has been managing and maintaining the property ever since.
Additional restoration efforts are underway today, including proper restoration of the existing buildings and reconstruction of the barn and summer kitchen. Those looking to preserve this history should donate through the Door County Historical Society. Tours are available to the public from late May until late October.
Door County has other historic lighthouses to see and great parks to visit. Be sure to check out this location.